Hi and welcome. And yes, I'm doing this talk in English because I'm doing this same talk at the PHP Serbia conference in May. So if you like this talk very much, come there again and see me again, or don't. So this talk is called INTRODDUCTION. And I imagine it as a sort of an, well, not sort of, but an introductory talk to the subject of domain-driven design. And my goal is to show you why I think and why I believe that domain-driven design is important for us software developers. My name is Robert, and I've been a PHP software developer and consultant since 2008. And over the years, I realized I really like working on legacy applications. I like fixing really bad code, really old code. I like to make it better, to improve it, to add tests, to add documentation. I also really like to contribute to open source software, because open source contributed a lot to my career. So I think it's just fair to give a little back. But what I really love to do in my job is to learn about the business that our applications should support. Now, why do I say should support? Because when we get hired to write a piece of software, that business hires us to help them, to make someone's job easier in that company. And if possible, to provide some extra value to that business so that business can grow beyond what it's capable of doing without that software being present. And during this decade working in this industry, I realized that this really rarely happens. Quite often the software we write is, well, shit. And there's quite a big disconnect between what we write as software and what the business needs from that software. And the code is really hard to maintain. You know, if you find a bug, you try to fix it, you break two other things. And then you want to add some new feature, and it's painful and slow, and the client yells at you like, wow, why are you so slow? Of course, from time to time, the existing team or a new team gets brought on, and they manage to make a small breakthrough. You know, fix a part of the code, fix some small, issues, and they are happy with it. Yeah, we did it. The code is now better. But after a while, that project is back to square one. It's back to being shit. And of course, I'm guilty of this myself. Like, I'm no better than any of you here. So, after going through this for a decade, I started wondering, why is this happening? Why can't we write good software? Do we blame the project managers who have crazy deadlines and won't take a no for an answer? Or maybe the clients because they just keep wanting new stuff. They just keep increasing the feature list. Or maybe we just picked the wrong framework. It's not enterprise enough. What I realized is that what I think that the real problem is communication.
Boy.
To be more precise, the lack of communication in software projects. When I started out in this industry, I had this attitude of, oh, I don't want to talk to people. I just want to put my headphones on, hack and code all day, get good money, and be home by 5:30. Dream job. But I realized that attitude is really bad. I was wrong having that attitude. And it's not just us programmers at fault here. The other side, the business side, the project managers, the clients, they also have to understand that we're not just some basement-dwelling creatures who talk to machines in binary all day, even though we are currently in a basement.
Yes, we are.
Today, I believe that programming is all about communication. That programming is communication. And when I say communication, I don't mean just like talking to other people. I mean all kinds of communication. Writing, reading, talking, listening. All that belongs to communication. And we must be really good at formulating our thoughts in such a way that it is easily understandable by other people. And by other people, I mean our users, our clients, our customers, other programmers, even ourselves 1 year or 10 years down the line. And communication is a two-way street. We also have to be really good, maybe even better than at talking. We have to be really good at listening to other people, hearing what they are trying to say, what they want to say. We have to understand what their problems are. So if we work on improving the quality and the quantity of the communication in a software project, then everyone who is involved in a software project will benefit from that better communication. It will end up that the software that we write will end up providing more value to the business. And it will be much easier to maintain down the line, because the software will be better connected to the business itself. So we need to focus on the business. We need to work together with the business people. We need to communicate and collaborate with them. Because yes, we are tech people. We like technology. We like the shiny new gadgets. We like the shiny new frameworks. But we are not hired to write software and then make up a business as we go. No, we are hired to help a business out. We are hired to support a business. So even if we want to focus on the technology, we must focus on the business first. Okay, so if we accept the fact that communication is the root of all our problems, maybe not all, but a good portion of it, how do we improve it? Do we write more emails? Do we have longer meetings? Or maybe we, I don't know, use 2 Jira instances instead of 1? No. We must accept the fact that we need to get better at communication. We must be ready and willing to communicate more with people. And we need to hear and understand their problems. And this is where I believe that domain-driven design can help us. Because domain-driven design is not a shiny new thing. The term domain-driven design was coined and explained in the book titled Domain-Driven Design, Tackling Complexity in the Heart of the Software. No, we're on just a second. Plug here. Plug in here. Plug in here. Plug in here. Okay. Yes, that's the slide. So, again, it's not a shiny new thing. It was coined by Eric Evans in 2003 in his book, Domain-Driven Design, Tackling the Complexity in the Heart of the Business of Software, right? It did gain a lot of rise of popularity in the recent years. And you probably even noticed that most of the PHP conferences these days has at least one talk or workshop on the subject of domain-driven design. Last year, I had a bit of downtime with projects, so I decided to see what domain-driven design is all about, unrelated to my thinking of that communication is the problem in software development. I just wanted to see what domain-driven design is about. And basically what I learned, that's what I want to share with you today. I learned that domain-driven design is sort of a philosophy. It is an approach to software development. Domain-driven design provides us with the means and the tools to write better software. And when I say better software, I mean software that provides more value to the business. And while the original idea was to improve software for complex businesses, I honestly believe that everyone who learns about domain-driven design and starts to understand it and apply it, even a portion of it, will become a better software developer because of it. The main focus of the DDD approach is the collaboration and communication with these so-called domain experts. And these domain experts are just people like you and me, but they work in that business, in that industry of the business, and they understand how that business works and why does it work the way it works. So with their help and guidance, we can identify the core problem, the core domain of that business. And also with their help, we come up with appropriate models that we can then use to solve those domain problems. And by domain-driven design, by putting and forcing that communication and that collaboration front and center, it will make us become better at communication and at collaboration with other people. So through this increased communication with the business people, we get a better understanding of that business. And if we get a better understanding of what we are trying to solve, then we get a clearer picture that we can use to create these better models, these better domain models. And again, the chain reaction is that the software at the end will provide more and better value to the business, and coincidentally, the software will have much higher quality as well. And what I realized during these past 1 year of learning and working with DDD is that things like test-driven development and behavior-driven development are much easier to work with. It's just such a joy to do TDD and BDD when the software follows the DDD approach. Lots of DDs. And one of the main reasons for this is that your software, if you follow the domain-driven design approach, your software is not driven anymore by the schema of your database or by the framework that you chose. It is driven by the needs of the business. So we team up with these domain experts and we ask them questions. We gather knowledge from them. We learn from them. And the software stops being just code. It becomes something much more. It ends up documenting that domain, that problem, those problems that the business is trying to solve. And the language that the business uses, it ends up being a part of the software that we have just written. And again, that strengthens the connection between the software and the business. So again, the code will be much better and in higher quality and easier to maintain. So because domain-driven design considers communication as a backbone to its success, to the success of the software project, really, we must stop considering us versus them, software experts versus domain experts. We all have to be one team working towards one goal, and that is to help that business out, to deliver value to that business. And everyone must be okay with that. Everyone must be willing to talk to everyone. Okay, not literally everyone, but there has to be some, easier communication, that the friction in communication between important people in teams should be lower. And also, big design up front, where some top management gives you like 100 pages, like, write this software. That doesn't work. That's proven to not work. And we have to stop thinking that kind of approach to software development works. Now, domain-driven design has the word design in it. And just because there's that word design in it, it doesn't mean that there is when you do DDD style software development, it doesn't mean that there's a design software phase and then a write code phase. It's all one huge, lovely process of designing and writing the software at the same time. Because through that communication and collaboration with the domain experts, we constantly design our models, we constantly improve our models and our software. So we experiment and explore using software what works and what doesn't work. Now, I don't have much experience with domain-driven design. I haven't used it actually on a real-life project where I was paid to use it. So I can't really say what's good or what's bad about domain-driven design. I'll hopefully learn about it one day and talk to you again on that subject. But what I know currently is that domain-driven design is not a silver bullet. It won't make your project magically shiny and perfect. And it's also not the framework that you install, clone from GitHub, whatever, and then makes your code perfect. And even though a lot of people say that it is for enterprise software only, I disagree with that. I honestly think that any type of software in any type of business and size of business can benefit from a DDD style approach. But what I do know is that domain-driven design is hard to learn. We're programmers. We like code. We like seeing code. We like reading code. We like writing code. We like talking about code. I bet you all expected today to hear me talk about code. That's not going to happen. Because code is not important. Shock! And the horror! Burn the witch at the stakes! DDD is hard to learn because what DDD considers to be important, it's quite obscure. It's not so easily, you can't really touch it like you can touch code. And when you ask some question in the world of DDD, plenty of answers that you will receive will be just simply, it depends. So go and ask some domain-driven design expert about how should you do such and such. And they will say to you, well, it depends. Because there are no two businesses in the world that are exactly the same. Even if business A and business B are trying to solve the same problem, they will take different approaches to solving that problem. So for business A, one software model will apply, and for business B, model B will apply. So for the same solutions, so for the same problems, we will have different solutions. And yeah, cheat. Right. And there is no single domain-driven application or example or whatever that you can just go on Stack Overflow and copy paste and boom, your job is done. For domain-driven design, there's a lot of thinking and a lot of hard thinking and talking and listening and working together with other people. But again, another reason why it's hard to learn, because even when you see a piece of code that has the DDD style, was written in the DDD style, what you see is only a small fraction of that project's timeline. You don't see the entire history of the code that was written with the DDD style. Sure, if you're lucky, there's a Git history and good commit messages, but there's always some level of knowledge loss, because the process that happened, that brought us to this piece of code right now, that process is important. There was a lot of discussions between domain experts and software experts. There was a lot of learning. There was a lot of talking. And even when you read books or articles or listen to people talk about this stuff, all that knowledge will be lost. So it's really hard to, easily understand all that stuff that is important in domain-driven design. So domain-driven design has two sides. One side, tactical DDD, and that's the not important side. That's the side that deals with code. Things like entities and value objects and aggregates, domain events, commands, factories, services, repositories, yada, yada, yada. Sure, you can take those building blocks from tactical DDD and apply it to your existing or to your new code base. But if you don't have a good strategy for that code base, you won't gain much from those DDD building blocks. And strategic DDD is that obscure side of domain-driven design that is hard to learn, which is the important part of domain-driven design. So when we say domain in domain-driven design, that domain represents the area of the business in which it operates. Their field, for example, an accountant works in the domain of accounting. A car mechanic works in the domain of car repairs. A hairdresser works in the domain of hairdressing. Those are their fields of expertise. And even though two businesses are in the same domain, they can take different approaches to solving the same problem. On one side, you can have an official chain of Mercedes car shops that fix only Mercedes cars. And then, on the other side, you have your next door neighbor who's banging on old rusty cars all day. But there's also the possibility that two businesses are in completely different domains, like a car mechanic and a hairdresser. But still, they have some needs in their businesses that are not exactly like same, but similar. For example, both the car mechanic and the hairdresser need an accountant. They need accounting done. And that's why I think there is no simple business in the world. Because no business deals with only one problem. A car mechanic deals with fixing cars, ordering parts, hiring mechanics, paying taxes, scheduling clients. A hairdresser deals with making your hair, making sure there's enough shampoo in the salon, scheduling clients, accounting, taxes, so on. So when we start out a new software project, the first thing we need to do is identify that core domain, that core problem. And together with the business stakeholders and the domain experts, we find out the reason why are we hired to write software. What is the problem that we need to solve? After all, that core problem, that core domain is the reason why the business exists in the first place. And that core domain, our main focus must be on that core domain, because that core domain is what gives that one business its competitive advantage over other businesses in that same domain. So we in discussions with the domain experts and through many iterations, we must make that core domain as small as possible. We need to shave off of it as much as possible. And then everything that does not belong into the core domain belongs into a subdomain. Now, one type of subdomain can be a supporting subdomain, and supporting subdomain is the one that, well, things falling off the core domain, and then that goes into the supporting subdomain. And that supporting subdomain plays a really important part in, well, supporting the core domain. And without the core domain present, that supporting subdomain doesn't really make much sense. Another type of subdomains are the general subdomains. And they become mostly for two reasons, is that a business needs some subdomain for it to successfully operate. For example, accounting. Every business in the world needs accounting. Or it can be some nice to have feature, to say it that way. For example, scheduling clients. You could always just drop your car off at the car mechanic, or you can, hey, when do you have a time available to fix my crappy Berlingo? Oh, and what is really important with the general subdomains is that a general subdomain of one business is usually a core domain of a different business. And now, because we are hired to write software for the core domain, what we need to do, as much as we can, is to not write software for the subdomains. If possible, we should outsource it. Find a different company that will deal with that shit. A hairdresser doesn't need an accountant in their salon all day. They could just take that pile of papers, dump it in their office, and accounting done. Take care of that. Or we can buy an existing software, or use open source software. Writing software for the subdomains should be our last resort, our last approach, because we're not hired to in a hair salon, we're not hired to fix their accounting. We're probably hired to, improve their overall speed of hair cutting stuff. So the core and subdomains, they give us problems. And to get a better understanding of these problems, we create domain models. Now take, for example, a globe. We've all had and used globes as children. It is a model of the planet Earth. We use that model to learn about longitudes and latitudes and how the Earth rotates and the ice caps and how it's tilted. But it's not 100% correct model. But the globe is useful to teach you about those things. And so a model, when you create a model, you should create only useful models that solve real business use cases. So again, together with the domain experts, We work in iterations on modeling these domain problems. And we try out different approaches, we experiment, we see what works, what doesn't. And we get a deeper understanding of the domain so that we can write better models and to improve our existing models. Because our models will never be perfect. I mean, if you aim to write a model that is 100% exactly like the real thing, you just created a new real thing. You didn't create a model, you just made a clone of it. So, there are times when we have to throw away an existing model and write a completely new one, a better one. Because all models are wrong, but some are useful. And those models need to have just enough to solve that problem that we need to solve. Yeah, I just told you this slide. Okay. So these domain models, they are not data models. They don't transfer data from the user interface into the database and then back. They are also not any single class in your code. They are just an abstraction of the domain problems that you create to easily understand that problem and then be better at solving those problems. We express those models as code using the building blocks from tactical DDD, the entities, the value objects, aggregates, and so on. These domain models, they contain and document the knowledge, the business rules, all those things that make a business a business. And these business rules, they must not ever leak out from these domain models. So when we create these models, we use the same language that the domain experts use. So if a domain expert says a client, a customer, an agent, a lead, then we should have no user God model in our classes, in our code. We should create client, customer, lead, and so on. And if they say schedule a meeting, then our code should read schedule a meeting and not make appointment. Because these differences in the language that we use leads to poor communication and eventually to poor code. But if the domain expert says, actually make appointment is much better than schedule a meeting, then we should change to that language and change the code, change the documents, change that all encompassing language, because that's what makes it ubiquitous language. That's the ubiquitous language in domain-driven design. And the model of the software that we write evolves together with this language. And this ubiquitous language is used by the team when discussing the problems and discussing the solutions. And it allows for clear and efficient communication between everyone involved. So we listen to these domain experts, and the terms that they use, they enter the ubiquitous language. And then when we hear a term that we don't understand or we don't know, we ask them for an explanation. And if still we don't understand it, then we ask them a better term, and then that better term should enter that ubiquitous language. Because that ubiquitous language is not the exactly same language that domain experts use. No, we design it in such a way that that ubiquitous language supports both the needs of the business and the needs of the software. And as with any other communication and any other language, the context of that language, of that communication matters. So when we know, okay, this is what I'm talking about right now, I put a boundary on it, an artificial boundary, to create a bounded context. So that the terms that are in this ubiquitous language, in this context, they cannot go into a different context. Because if they do, then again that leads to poor communication because, oh, did you mean this or that? You know, this is, and we need to listen to domain experts to discover these contexts. Yeah. So, a core or a subdomain, they are the problems, and they live in their own little universe. And the bounded context with the ubiquitous language, they live in the universe of solutions. And if we can, we should have a one-to-one mapping between the problem space, the subdomains, and the bounded context with their ubiquitous languages. Of course, not everything is perfect in this world, so there can happen when one bounded context spans multiple subdomains, or that one subdomain has multiple bounded contexts. But even if we discover that, we should probably do everything we can to evolve towards that one-to-one mapping between subdomains and bounded contexts. So by improving the solutions, we change the solutions, and that can trigger a change in the bounded context or in the ubiquitous language. We find a term that is more fitting to that solution. But that doesn't mean that the problem has changed. We just took a different approach. But there's also a time when we realize that, wait a minute, we're working on the wrong problem. We're solving the wrong thing. Yeah, we have a solution. We spent on it 6 months. But that's not the problem that we're trying to solve. In those cases, when the problem changes, our solution should change as well. Even if we spent, I don't know, 5 years on finding the perfect solution. If it's the wrong problem, throw away that solution, start over. Now, in a complex business, these bounded contexts, these problems, there can be many of them. So, to get an easier understanding of how these bounded contexts work and how they relate to each other and which can talk to which, we create a context map, which is basically a high-level overview, a high-level diagram of these bounded contexts. So finally, I believe that communication needs to be improved between software experts and domain experts, between software people and business people. Domain-driven design, I believe, can help us with that, because a business has its domain of operation, and with the domain experts from that domain, we talk to them, we communicate with them, we collaborate with them, we work together really closely, and then we come up with models for that problem, and use those models to solve those problems. And we create a language that lives within its boundaries, that satisfies both the needs of the business and the software. And we iterate and we experiment in such a way that the current problem is always solved in the most optimal way. Thank you. Any questions?